All right, welcome back to the Dr. Jimbo Love Show. I'm here with Seth Matthew at Brothers Bar and Grill, Northfield the shops at Northfield. And we're going to talk a little bit about football today. We've got the Army versus Navy game that starts. It's probably already kicked off at 10 o'clock. Again, this is one of those kind of games. It's a military game where the records don't matter. Army is 3-8, Navy is 8-3, but just throw that out because they're playing for pride. And the winner goes to the Military Bowl and faces Air Force. One of the things that's really cool, this is as old school a game as you possibly can get. The over and under is 34. When was the last time you heard of an over and under 34 or less points?
Yeah, and that's a tribute to the defenses. But the crazy thing about these games is, for some reason, the military schools do not match up with the traditional college football. You'll have Navy play some random ranked team, and they end up pulling the upset, which is just baffling because they then will go up against a no-name school and then lose. This year, I mean, you have Army severely not favored because of their record, but as I've seen in the past when it comes to this game, it doesn't matter the records. Like you said, it was playing for pride. So anything can happen in these games. They're usually super fun to watch because, you know, you're not playing for a college football championship. Dedicate some fun times for your seniors. Pull some trick plays. There's always something unique, something that usually hits the ESPN top 10 every single year. So it's just very enjoyable to watch. And you know what? Like, it's a great way to kick off the college football bowl games.
Absolutely. And, you know, the biggest stories with these two teams usually is who steals whose mascot. Mm-hmm. They've been doing that since 1990. They actually had a little thing on College Game Day today where they were interviewing the first people from the Navy that actually stole the Army's goat. Was it a goat that they stole or a mule? I can't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
Army had a 14-minute drive this year. Okay, that's old school football. That's 3 plays and a cloud of dust.
And that takes a whole quarter away, which, I mean, a lot of people will be like, oh, they had a long drive, they got a touchdown. Well, the other team hopefully will come right back. But if they don't, and Army can get another long drive, we all of a sudden sitting at halftime down by 2 scores.
Exactly.
So if you can control the ball.
Well, plus you just completely tire a defense out. I mean, a defense is not used to being on the field for that many plays. Next thing that's going on tonight is the Heisman Trophy. This is one of the most unique years for the Heisman Trophy because there really isn't any standout person. We have Bryce Young, quarterback from Bama, 43 touchdowns, 4 interceptions.
And there is a unique thing about him. Okay. I mean, it's weird to say, but Bama has been dominant for so long, never has produced a Heisman quarterback.
No.
And so he could be the first, and I believe he's still a freshman. So not only is he young, not to play any word games with his name,
right,
but he could be the first Alabama quarterback to win the Heisman. So, I mean, that's exciting news.
It's interesting. If you think about the Heisman Trophy, Alabama has been a dominant team since over 10 seasons. They've had 3 Heisman Trophy winners. And what's interesting, too, is we're going to talk a little bit about some of these other individuals. We have a defensive player that's up for it, which is going to be very, very interesting out of Michigan. C.J. Stroud. Seth knows a ton about C.J. Stroud. He's up for it. He had 38 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's going to be over 4,000 yards in passing. What are your feelings about C.J. Stroud?
Unfortunately, this isn't his year. He's a young quarterback. He's a freshman. But with that blowout loss to Michigan, they do take in account just getting destroyed. The Heisman used to be you had to be perfect. Now, on defensive side, what's perfect? Getting a sack a game, getting 2 sacks a game, getting an interception every other game. It's really hard to pick what a perfect defender looks like. But when it comes to offense, they want to see 300 yards a game. They want to see multiple touchdowns. They want to see pure dominance. Same with wide receivers. Same with running backs. They want to see minimum 100 yards a game. It's an unspoken standard that they have for these players. And I think with that loss and especially with the most recent memory, you're not only just following C.J. Stroud losing that game, you're watching Bryce Young destroy Georgia, who we all thought was going to be the most dominant team in college football from what we've seen in the past 10 years.
Absolutely. And, you know, C.J. Stroud, when they beat Michigan State, when they just completely crushed them, they're up 49-0 at halftime, that would probably be his Heisman Trophy moment, you know, as far as things go. Bryce Young is the 97-yard drive they had against Auburn that he had to have to save their season, put it into overtime and over to, to tie it up in the first overtime and be able to face the second overtime. Kenny Pickett, this guy's an individual who's very interesting out of Pitt. Quarterback, he's been a 4-year starter, 42 touchdowns, not many interceptions. He's the gentleman that did what we consider a fake slide last week. Now, did you see College Game Day at all this morning?
I did not watch it this morning, but I do know a lot about the play.
Okay, because and I'm going to let you chime in on this. I heard him actually give an explanation, and his explanation seemed pretty heartfelt. He said that he was running and that he had all intentions of sliding, and that as he went into a slide, he changed his mind only because the 3 individuals that were closing in on him, he felt like he could get more yardage. I looked in his eyes. He has no reason to lie. I mean, he could say, hey, I did it because it's part of the rules and I thought I'd get away with it. But I believe him. Seth, what are your impressions on it?
See, and I wish he just would have said that. I wish he just would have said.
You don't think he's being serious?
I think he may have thought he could beat him. I don't think he could have beat the defenders, to be totally honest. He looked dead to rights. That's why he was taking the slide. And then it's a bam-bam play. It's hard to see what was going through his mind. He could have saw that they were holding up and made that run and then realized he could beat them. Because we don't know when those players step down. Now, that was a game-changing moment for that game, even though they ended up winning pretty handily.
It was the first touchdown of the game.
Yeah.
So it set it a precedence, and it set it the momentum. You're absolutely right about that.
And the unfortunate part is, here's the thing as a defender side, and I feel for the defense, is if you're going to hit him, like if he was a running back, you would have crushed him.
Right.
And he would have just been down there. We would have moved on with the game, but they would have had to keep playing to try to get that touchdown. Since everyone holds up, now all of a sudden you're down by 7. So it really goes like, I'm glad that they put a rule in it because QBs are super protected ever since Tom Brady has started making fun. Basically, it's the Tom Brady rules in the NFL. You can barely touch them. You gotta, if they release the ball in 1 second and you touch them, it's a flag on you. So defenders have to be very conscious of when they're making contact with the quarterback. And if a quarterback is going down, you're supposed to let him go down. And I feel like Wake Forest did the right thing, and they were punished for it because there was no rule for it.
Right. Well, and whether the guy faked me out or not, I think, it's good that they put the rule in immediately. This is effective immediately, right? So there'd be no more fake slides. And it's dangerous for the defensive players because the defensive players are going full tilt. They let up, and then they've got to, try to make a move, an athletic move, which is where injuries happen.
And people don't realize how much the defense has to think and how sharp these guys have to be. Because if a quarterback's running out of bounds, you're not supposed to touch him. Or if a wide receiver or running back, you're still not supposed to touch him. Now, if it is a quarterback, you're getting the flag 9 times out of 10.
Exactly.
But what if that quarterback was running, and all of a sudden they cut up the sideline and they go get a touchdown on him, and it looks like they were going out of bounds?
Yeah.
So, I mean, these defenders are sharp, they're smart. We need to help them out, too, because right now we're only protecting the quarterback, and we really need to help the defense so they're not getting burned on plays because we created so many rules against the quarterback that they're it's basically like practice. It's like they're wearing a red jersey, untouchable.
In the NFL it is, completely. And in the NFL is a different situation. I mean, these owners got together and they talked with the Players Association, and they want to protect their biggest investment, which is in college. I guess it's the same thing as well, but, let's just see what happens with this new rule, and hopefully we won't have any kind of injuries induced from it. What is your feelings about Kenny Pickett, though, as a quarterback and as a Heisman candidate?
He's good. I'll give him that. I do think he is going to be a decent draft pick this year. Do I think he's number 1? I'll have to really look at the draft class there. But the big thing is you played for Pitt, which it's not a bad thing.
They won the ACC.
Yeah, it's a great school, but like the ACC compared to the Big Ten, compared to SEC, I mean, it's tough to really judge them. I mean, you get these players. I'll talk about the Vikings for a second. Kellen Mond was drafted last year from Texas A&M. He had beat most of Johnny Manziel's records, if not all of them.
Right.
And I've seen him in preseason. He doesn't look good. So it's crazy to see the jump in athletic ability, the jump in the speed of the gameplay. Now, Kenny Pickett may well be the next quarterback that comes through that is the new star. It's just going to take time to tell.
Yeah, and the thing about him is, in his defense, the only team that they played besides Wake that was probably really, really dominant was Clemson. He threw over 300 yards against Clemson. He had no interceptions. So let's just see how it goes. Now this brings us to Aiden Hutchinson, who is our defensive end, or they call him an edge rusher. He has 13 and a half sacks. What's interesting about that is he beat his dad's record for the number of sacks for Michigan, which was set in 1992. They both wear 97, and he's just an awesome kid. It's going to be tough for a defensive guy to win a Heisman, and Charles Woodson was the last one to do it. It was in 1997. That's 24 seasons ago. So what are your feelings about Hutchinson and Michigan's defense?
So this is where it gets confusing on like where to pick the Heisman. Do you pick the quarterback that has all the flashy stats, or you pick that defense that has the grinding stats? Looking at it, I mean, he plays in the Big Ten. You got to take that into factor. And not to go back to Kenny Pickett for 1 second, I don't mean to rag on him too much. You look at the quarterbacks that are in the NFL right now, minus the 3 from Oklahoma. A lot of these guys came from small schools. I mean, you look at Colin Kaepernick came from Nevada. Who would have thought that? You look at Josh Allen coming from Wyoming. So, I mean, Kenny Pickett does have a shot here. But going back to defense, it's harder to engage. It's not that flashy fan favorite. It's not the going to win you the game because he got the last touchdown type of deal. But it's hard play that keeps his team in the game and put him in the position to win.
Yep.
And so we really have to factor in and out. Now, I don't know how many sacks it takes to get the Heisman.
Right.
I know how many yards and touchdowns it does. It takes usually over 4,000 yards, somewhere around over 25 to 30 touchdowns, and you got to have minimal picks between 3 and 4. But defense is kind of a gray area, and maybe this is enough. I mean, maybe they factor in how many teams are ranked that he played.
And they're undefeated.
Yeah, and
they're the only team that's undefeated still, right?
No, Michigan lost.
Oh, Michigan did lose.
They lost to Michigan State. They blew that game right before it.
Shoot.
But either way, that was a close game.
Yeah, my bad.
But then again, now you have to look, because quarterbacks are always blamed, and wide receivers, not too much. But quarterbacks are usually the ones that take the heat for losing and winning games. Defense is rarely attributed with wins. The only defense I've seen that we could attribute with wins this year is Georgia, minus this last game.
Right.
But they have really dominated this year. So, I mean, you have a guy, he's great. I think he's going to be a great NFL player. I think he's going to have a great career. I just don't know where I can put him in the Heisman now.
Yeah, it's so hard to measure. You're right, because there's no way to really to give him a distinguishing. How do you compare his stats with the quarterback?
Yeah, 13.5 sacks to 35 touchdowns.
Exactly.
Like, what is the comparison? Do we favor sacks over touchdowns? We should, because I feel like there's less of them. But what's enough to win it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you tune in tonight. They'll be having the vote, and everything will end up being about 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock Mountain Time. Let's talk a little bit about College Championship Week and how Seth and I did with our picks. Seth did a lot better than I did. This Baylor game, Baylor had a really nice season. It ended up with the Sugar Bowl. They beat Oklahoma State. Gundy, again, if you talk to anybody that's from Oklahoma, they said he basically choked on another big game. What are your feelings? You're an Oklahoma fan?
So, not Oklahoma State.
I know, no. You're an Oklahoma.
Yeah, but my big thing with this is I was rooting for OK State. I picked Baylor. I thought Baylor was a little bit more athletic. I saw what they did against Oklahoma. Oklahoma State was supposed to be known for their defense. They didn't hold Oklahoma, and when you fall apart at the wrong time, it's pretty detrimental to your program. But the biggest thing about this game is, if everyone watched it, if you didn't watch it, I'll explain what happened. Oklahoma State had a shot. They were there. They ended 1 yard short of actually pulling this one out. So I wouldn't call Van Gundy a failure. I mean, first of all, I can't remember the last time that he's won this game.
Right.
But the fact is, you're 1 yard short. Your team I didn't really plan them in the top 10 this year, but they made it, and they won the games they should have. And this is a successful season. It feels like a sting because they came up short, and I was disappointed because I really wanted Oklahoma State to win, even though I picked Baylor, just to shake up the top 4 to create some controversy. But no controversy. Baylor did not have enough to make it into the top 4, and it was just overall a fun game to watch.
Yep. And, it's good for Baylor. Baylor grinded out a great season, and they're being rewarded by going to the Sugar Bowl. They're playing against a team, Mississippi, which is extremely excited to be in the Sugar Bowl. The people in Mississippi haven't gone to a Sugar Bowl in years, probably back to when Archie Manning was being the quarterback there. So let's talk a little bit about UGA and Bama. And once again, Bama just outclassed them. What really kind of gave me the impression is that you've got UGA, who's undefeated, who just hasn't learned how to win on a national stage yet. I don't know. Go figure, but Bama wins. What are your feelings about Bama's victory?
So again, I believe I picked Georgia. I might have took Bama, but the big thing is with this game is
I took Georgia.
When you have a top coach that's been in this position many, many times. He's been maybe not in this explicit situation, but they definitely hold their own, and they're definitely always relevant until the end of the year. I wouldn't count Bama out. Now, I was surprised to see the way this game went. I thought Georgia would be more prepared.
So did I.
But, Nick Saban had his team ready. Georgia did not look ready. Now, here's the best part. They might get to meet again, and I can't wait for that game because it's going to be a lot closer. I can't pick who it's going to be yet because I really got to see how the Cincinnati, Michigan, and all those guys pan out. But it's just exciting football. It's unfortunate they're from the same conference. Only reason why I say that is this is the reason why we favor certain conferences. But overall, Nick Saban did a great job. In Georgia, you just didn't show up. You still haven't beat Bama, but what better way would it to be in the college championship?
Exactly, because then no one would remember this at all, except for it being, not winning the SEC, And Georgia's quarterback struggled. I mean, he just looked like he was completely outclassed. It'd be interesting. I guarantee you he's dying for a rematch.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about Pitt versus Wake. That's the ACC championship. And again, we talked a little bit about Kenny Pickett, and we talked about the fake slide. Pitt pulled it out, won their first ACC title ever because they've been in the Big East for many, many years. So, good for Pitt.
Yeah.
What were your impressions of that game?
Big thing is with Wake Forest, I mean, if anyone's watched Wake Forest this whole entire year, they don't have a defense.
Right.
And that's unfortunate. It caught up with them near the end. They were putting up 50 points and giving up 48 and pulling out those wins, and that was great for them. But when you run into a Pittsburgh team that actually has a defense and they have a quarterback with a decent offense and they're more balanced, it just showed that Pittsburgh had more tools, they had more balance on the football, and they were just able to come away with the win. But hats off to Wake Forest for making it this far. Usually I only hear Wake Forest. ACC in general, I don't hear, minus Clemson these last couple of years, I don't hear in football. I only hear in basketball.
Well, everybody knows, Wake Forest, CP3 was from there. Tim Duncan was from there. They really are known as a basketball school. And one thing about Wake Forest, if you don't realize that, there's only 2,500 undergraduate students. So it's one of the very small schools, if not the smallest school in the ACC. Cincinnati versus Houston. Again, Cincinnati needed to not just squeak by and get an easy victory. They ended up winning 35-20, which was enough to get them into the Final Four and the bowl playoff system. So good, hats off to Cincy. Let's see now. Now they're playing, they're playing Bama. Let's hope it's not some huge blowout that embarrasses them, but it could be. So
here's the biggest issue. Even with the Houston game, it's been Cincinnati's story all year. They don't show up in the first half. The game was separated by a couple points.
Yep.
Should never be that way. Since he tries to do that in the college football championship,
that's just
over. Yeah.
They're going to get crushed. They're going to be down by 30, 35 at halftime, and it's not even going to matter. Our final rankings.
I'll give that one to you.
What's that?
Michigan, Iowa.
We didn't do Michigan and Iowa. That's right. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about Michigan and Iowa. I was completely wrong. I had that as my upset special. I thought that Iowa might be able to show up and surprise Michigan, especially after their big victory over Ohio State. Not the case. Michigan handled business. Hey, this might be Harbaugh's year.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking at right now. I mean, I knew who was ever coming out. I was disappointed I was coming out of the other side on the West, just because I knew they didn't have the offensive tools to keep up. I was really hoping maybe a Wisconsin. Didn't really want to see Minnesota get embarrassed, so that was good they didn't make it. But you know what? Michigan was a better team, hands down, all sides of the ball. Iowa's defense is what they relied on all year. Yep. They held for a minute, but they were on defense all the time. Their offense literally was going 3 and out over and over and over again. And you're going to wear down your defense that way. And Michigan ended up just getting away with it. As soon as they had a couple breakout plays, somewhere around like 50 to 60 yards for these touchdowns, that's just deflating for a defense. And Iowa's offense never came to support them.
Yeah, and what's really, Iowa's been tough all year. They've had a really interesting year. They beat Penn State early. They were ranked as high as number 2. They had a great season. And hats off to Iowa for that. We're talking 5 through 9. Again, we've got Notre Dame that's versus Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl. Number 6, Baylor is going to be playing Mississippi, University of Mississippi Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. Ohio State is going to play Utah. Utah's first trip to the Rose Bowl. What are your feelings about that?
Yeah, so this is going to be interesting because this whole matchup, first of all, Ohio State's loss came from Oregon, who has been handed 2 losses now by Utah. And Utah's defense is deadly. Now the question is C.J. Stroud, can he get out? Can he be protected? Can he get the throws done? That seems to be the question because Utah State is not Utah is not typically on TV where I've watched them because there's usually been better games of like Georgia, Alabama. Been watching the top 4 a little bit more than I've been watching them. But Utah's sneaking up there. They are looking good. Their losses have been close. And I would not be surprised to see Utah pull off this upset.
Yep, me either. And that's why we kind of stopped here, is that this is my upset special. I think that Utah's going to beat Ohio State. I think Ohio State's going to have a little bit of a letdown, because of their loss to Michigan. Although, 4 weeks is a long time, it's not like the next week you have to play after a big win, so they may prepare. Yeah. But I'm going to pick Utah, and I can't wait to watch the Rose Bowl. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And so another thing you guys want to remember is to come down to Brothers. We're sitting outside. You can see Seth shivering a little bit over here, although he's pretty tough because he's from Minnesota. But we're sitting here on the deck. We're looking right forward, and we can see Outdoor World. Remember that the shops at Northfield are just on the opposite side of I-70 than Stapleton, former Stapleton, now called Central Park Region or District. Come on down and check us out. Seth was nice enough to get us some gator balls yesterday, and my friend had them for the first time and couldn't believe it. The combination of...
Yeah, they're so amazing.
Tell them a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's basically just meaty goodness with cheese. It's literally chicken, jalapeno, pepper jack cheese wrapped in bacon and deep fried. And it sounds like a weird combination.
It's not.
But
it works.
The way they're held together, it's so amazing. When you cut them open, they ooze out. Cut them open when you get them. Do not bite in like an apple because I've seen many times where people get burned because that cheese is still getting cooked in there. But overall, that's one of the greatest things to drink with a nice cold beer and watch your football games on Saturday, Sunday, or whenever these bowl games end up being this year.
Excellent. And then he's got it. We're right in the midst of Christmas party season. Seth has a mezzanine above the bar. Tell him a little bit about that. That's a really great.
Yeah, so it holds about 60 people, and we do buffet styles. We can do it downstairs as well, but if you want your own little private get-together area, it's perfect. It has 3 TVs up there, so you don't have to miss any action on sports. And it's full bar, yep. And it's just a full fun time. We've been booking ever since we opened. We've been booking parties, and they've just been increasing and increasing. And a lot of repeat customers because they just have a great time because we have a fun atmosphere, we have great drink specials, and the food's amazing.
It really is. I spoke to the kitchen manager this morning. I asked him what his secret is. He wouldn't tell me. It's all proprietary sauces. Everything's made fresh. It's definitely a unique individual experience that you're not going to get at every other mom and pop restaurant across the Denver metro area. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of these bowls, okay? The first bowl game, and again, some of these bowl games, there's so many of them. We have the Cure Bowl. The Cure Bowl is for cancer research. I think it's a great cause. You're going to see a lot of pink because that, of course, is the overall color. But you're going to have some interesting teams playing each other that you may not be familiar with. So, take a little time and look it up. And, we've got Northern Illinois, which is 9-4. They won the MAC conference. And they're going to be playing against my Coastal Carolina Chanticleeras, which is another form of gamecock. And Coastal Carolina has been in the top 25 pretty much the whole year. They're 10-2. And we'll have to see. Now Illinois, Northern Illinois, what do we know about them? They've beaten 5 bowl-eligible teams. Their 4 losses came to bowl-eligible teams. So this team is not some schmuck team that's just rolling in to play in some meaningless bowl. Quarterback for Coastal Carolina, McCall, missed 2 games with injuries. Remember, they have the 4th best offense in the nation. Seth, what have you got for this?
Yeah, so Grayson Mccall from Coastal Carolina, he's just a great player. He right now, even with being injured, still at 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's a career year for some quarterbacks out there. Northern Illinois, you got to take some of their losses with a grain of salt. Yes, they've lost to some lesser competition, but you got to realize one of them, it was a blowout, but they lost to Michigan. So they played a team that's going to the college football championship. Now, Coastal Carolina, they were there. They got ranked in the top 25, got upset by Appalachian State. Appalachian State loves being the underdog. They were the team that actually upset Michigan many years ago. And I believe it was a blocked field goal. But coming on to it, Grayson Mitchell and his wide receiver that he has, they have a great duo that they just tear apart teams.
Yep.
And Northern Illinois has a decent running back that he's going to have to step it up this game. He's going to have to take control of the ball, and he's going to have to get those first downs. If they keep giving the ball back, it's going to be lights out because this team's fast, they're offensively efficient, and their defense isn't too shabby either. So I'm going to go with Coastal Carolina in this exciting game because these bowl games, even though anything can happen, with these teams that we haven't watched all year, you just got to go with the edge, stats, and see what's going on with them.
And understand that Coastal Carolina's one of its most famous alumni is Dustin Johnson. You guys that are golf fans out there, he'll be watching this with fervor, and it'll be an interesting game for the Cure Bowl. The next one is the Cricket/Celebration Bowl. And, if you're somebody who likes ghetto phones and has T-Mobile envy, you may be a big cricket fan. I, myself, am not. But the bowl itself is South Carolina State, who was the MEAC champions, versus Jackson State. And this game is kind of neat because it's traditionally your historic black colleges, and this is their bowl. So South Carolina State, this is the first time participant for them. They're pretty excited. And, of course, Jackson State features Deion Sanders, and they are the Southwest Athletic Conference Championship, even though Jacksonville is clearly an East Coast team. What have you got for this game?
So Jackson State only has one loss. I mean, they've looked good all year, regardless of the difficulty of their opponents. And their one loss came against a very good, I believe they were the Clemson loss, I believe.
Okay.
And then you have UL Monroe, not as shiny on the record, but they also they held in there with LSU, so they're capable of coming out with a big game. They just got bowl eligible. They're 6-5, so I mean, you squeaked in there. But like I said, when it gets to the bowl game, this is the end of your season regardless. These players are playing for your seniors. You're playing for all this. Anything could happen. I do give the edge to Jackson State. They just seem a little bit more explosive, and they have only lost to Clemson. And they had a couple other notable teams, maybe not with the best record this year, but I believe they played against some other ACC teams this year that really, even though they weren't that good. I mean, I believe they had a Kansas win, which who didn't beat Kansas? Oklahoma almost didn't.
It'll be interesting too after the season. Have you heard any rumors about Deion Sanders? Will he be leaving Jackson State, looking to move up to maybe a bigger university? Have you heard any talk about that at all?
So I haven't heard a lot about it right now, but the big thing is anything can happen right now. There's way more coaching changes than I can remember ever happening. To talk about Clemson, they lost their offensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator. They lost everybody.
Right.
So it really goes to, if he was going to move, this would be the perfect year because there's so many jobs open. There's so many people that would want him, especially taking a team 11-1. And if you put a stamp on it with a bowl victory, Deion Sanders' college record is phenomenal.
Yeah. I know South Carolina lost his son. His son was playing for the Gamecocks and transferred to Jackson State to play for his dad. I don't blame him. I did the exact same thing. When I was in high school, I played for, my dad was my coach, and it was probably one of the best experiences of my life. I really enjoyed it. I played 3 years for him. All right, the next bowl is the LA Bowl. This is the inaugural game for the year. It's the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl, and the way it looks like, all over the internet. Jimmy Kimmel is their, I think he's their, the leader of the parade or whatever you want to call there. But you've got Oregon State versus Utah State, another team from Utah. It's going to be in a decent game. Utah State is 10-3, Oregon State 7-5. First bowl game for Oregon State since 2013. Quarterback very average for Oregon State, but they have a really good running back in this BJ Baylor, who had 1,259 yards from rushing. And you've got the quarterback for Utah State, which is Bonner, his last name, 36 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, not too bad. They have 3 running backs that share the load.
Yeah, I think the big one on this one is Oregon State minus their record. I mean, look at their losses. They've lost to quality teams. Their wins have come against USC, which USC isn't what they used to be. They beat Stanford, and they beat Utah. So, I mean, that's a huge win.
Right.
Then you go into Utah State. Bonner is a great quarterback. I've watched him play a little bit this year. He's very explosive. But like you said, Oregon State does have a great running back. I have a feeling that Oregon State's defense is a little bit better, and they're going to, especially with beating like teams like Utah, that they're going to hang in there. They're going to control the ball with their running back. He averages 6 yards a carry.
Wow.
So, I mean, when you're getting 6 yards a carry, that makes it second and short every single time.
Yep.
And that just gives them the edge. And really, Utah State run game not up to par with the rest of college football. And so they're really going to be relying on those throws. And I just think that when you get to the second half, if the game's close, that Oregon State's going to squeak this one out.
Yeah, running games in these kind of situations seem to favor over passing quarterbacks. So, well, good deal. We're looking for some other ways to expand some of our coverage, and we're going to talk a little bit about college hoops. Again, it's very early in the season, so any kind of rankings and stuff like that really are kind of based upon recruiting people and a lot of hearsay. But we do have a pretty interesting game here with Wisconsin at ranked 22 preseason versus Ohio State. The match predictor, which is a betting tool, basically says that 71.5% favors Ohio State versus the 20% chance for Wisconsin. What are your feelings on this game?
So the big thing here, especially when you get to basketball, it always comes down. I mean, not everyone's a Steph Curry where you can actually carry the team at the guard point. But Wisconsin relies heavily on their guards. They use about 3, sometimes 4 of them on the court at all the time. They don't have the greatest bigs. Ohio State's the opposite. They have great bigs that can really take over a game. And, the percentage of making 2-pointers over 3, significantly different. But yeah, Ohio State really relies on EJ Liddell.
Yep.
And he is just a beast down low. And Wisconsin really doesn't have an answer for that. The only thing that they have is maybe they can outshoot him with Johnny Davis.
Johnny Davis, yeah.
Johnny Davis averaged 20 points.
Yep.
And so, I mean, when you have a guy that can shoot like that, on the right night, he can pull this win. But you can't be reliant on a 3-point all the time. You see that with a lot of teams out there. I remember back in the day when maybe it was 5-6 years ago, Michigan State literally was a 3-point team. Mm-hmm. They kind of switched from being big and being shooters, but they really shot like a majority of threes, and eventually it caught up to them.
It did in the tournament.
Yeah, and so I'm going with Ohio State. It's a more consistent pick. It has more things that you can rely on, and a more sure thing in their big men controlling the game.
And again, this is a 21 versus 22 matchup. Again, the rankings really have little to nothing to do with how these games play in the preseason. The next game, which is really kind of a cool game, it's Villanova versus Baylor. It was a Sweet 16 rematch from last year, and Baylor, the eventual national champions, beat Villanova 62-51. Now again, this is college basketball. There's transfer portals. There's huge differences between seasons. But you've got Villanova that's ranked 6th preseason, and you've got Baylor that's ranked 2. So we'll have to see how this plays out. What have you got?
So the big thing with this one, Villanova versus Baylor. Baylor's undefeated. You got to take that with a grain of salt, though, because Villanova only has 2 losses. Both those losses came against ranked teams. One being a highly ranked Purdue, and one being I don't know exactly what they're ranked now, but UCLA was number 2 at one point before they got blown out by Gonzaga.
They were a top 3 team this season for sure.
And so you can just have great basketball here at the end of the day. But what really goes with it is it's too early to judge. It's the same as college football when we started the season this year when we started the show. I didn't care that Ohio State was in the top 4. They fell off. Oklahoma didn't even lose to deserve to drop out.
Right.
And then when they came out with the real rankings, they got screwed over. But
and his coach left.
Yeah, and his coach left, which is heartbreaking.
I have to stop you just for a second. I heard some stuff about Lincoln Riley and some of the deal behind the scenes that happened. Okay, according to my source, Lincoln Riley owned 2 homes in the Oklahoma area, and USC not only got the houses to sell, but paid off the mortgages on both houses.
That's nuts.
Put them in a $13 million mansion. Okay, so you wonder, as an Oklahoma fan, and I know Seth is bitter, you get thrown that kind of opportunity as a young person like Lincoln Riley. How do you say no to SoCal?
You can't say no.
Anyways, I'm sorry to bring
Oh,
that
no,
up.
it's okay. It still hurts.
We'll move on to a little better thought
But
here.
this is a great matchup. You're looking at two quality teams that will both be there at the when we get into March Madness. But you know what? When it comes this early in the season, I like going with the upset. I say Villanova gives Baylor their first loss, even though everything's against it. It's in Baylor. And the big thing with college sports, fans play a big thing. They play more of a momentum swing than they do in any pro sport. Having the loud cheers, unless it's maybe playoff atmosphere. But these costumes come to rage every time. They're super noisy. They bring up the intensity of the arena. And I think that still Villanova is going to overcome it.
Overcome it and do it. And we'll see what happens in Waco when they play. The last one we're going to feature is a little home. I don't know whether or not you're an OU basketball fan, but we've got Arkansas number 12 versus an unranked Oklahoma University. Eric Musselman's got the Arkansas, firing on all cylinders. They were an Elite 8 team last year. They lost to the national champions, the Baylor. And, they're undefeated right now, and they're ranked 12. So is that 12 really a 12, or is it a 2? We don't know, but they haven't been beaten yet. Oklahoma has a new coach, Porter Moser. Predicted bubble team going into the game, some growing pains, and no real big standouts. What have you got for Oklahoma?
So this is a weird matchup for me because Arkansas, typically when you come out of this conference, your bigs are the people that you rely on. But JD, I don't want to mess up his name, but I believe it's like Note, their guard, is just phenomenal. And they have a huge depth at guards where they can put any four out. So getting one in foul trouble or trying to knock him out of the game like Duke did to Gonzaga, it's just not realistic because they have somebody to replace him.
And that's Oklahoma that has the cards, the deep cards, right?
No, that's Arkansas.
Arkansas. Okay.
So when you go with
I want to make sure.
When you go with the forwards, though, Oklahoma has a big in Jay Williams. He's a sophomore. He gets all the minutes pretty much for their forwards. He is a very good player, but I mean, if he's attacked wrong, and he gets in foul trouble, Oklahoma's going to find themselves in a world of hurt. But them too, they have great depth in guards. So this is going to be, I have a feeling, a big shootout game. I do think that Oklahoma has a little bit of depth because they have held up against some pretty hard competition this year. And Arkansas, they're due for a loss. Nobody goes undefeated in college basketball anymore, minus Gonzaga, but they already have their loss this year. So I'm going to go with there's no undefeated this year. And you know what? I think Arkansas going to Oklahoma with that crowd, I think Oklahoma's going to squeak out another top 25 win. They already have one against Florida.
Awesome. Well, we got some Wild Hogs and some Sooners, so let's see what happens. All right, so we're going to shift focus here. We're going to move on to the NFL and some of the games that we predicted last week, and how well we did. We'll start out with the Bills versus the Patriots. Again, the Patriots, it was a Monday night matchup. The wind was absolutely crazy in Western New York. They were kicking field goals, practicing, and they looked like boomerangs, basically. So the Pats ended up winning a really hard victory. Again, the Bills, they really needed that win for a signature win. What were your impressions of that?
Yeah, so that game was super significant. It really shaped the division. I mean, of course you can lose later on, but you beat the head-to-head person that could compete with you for the division. The most embarrassing thing for the Bills in this game is basically how they lost it. They have a top defense in the NFL. It should be top against the run. And now this is game 2 that they blew it against the run. The Patriots only threw the ball 3 times. It's like a record low. And at some point, you had to see it coming. Maybe second half, third quarter.
The weather was just such a factor.
And
if you weren't going with the wind, it was really hard to throw the ball. That's interesting. That's a great stat.
Yeah, and the Patriots handed it off. I mean, Damian Harris handled the first half. He had that big run for a touchdown. It was amazing. But he actually got hurt on the play. So you really went down to one running back. So you have a tired running back run against you all day, and you still lose 14-7. I don't know if the Bills just don't have the running backs to compete in a high-win game, because obviously they tried to throw the ball and it was unsuccessful. But you know what? Hats off to Bill Belichick, the mastermind. Still put the Patriots back. I'm jealous of the Patriots fans because as a Minnesota fan, we've never been like super relevant, and other teams have down years. The Patriots had one. You had 1 year where you're not going to win your division, and if you win your division, you had 1 year off of losing Tom Brady, Gronk, and Edelman, and you're back to the top.
And you're back to the top. And that really does. It comes down to your coaching staff and the culture that you have made. The Steelers have had that kind of culture, but not to the degree that the Pats. And it's hard for me to admit that because I've hated the Patriots for years, 20 years, as long as Brady's been there. All right, we have the Broncos versus the Chiefs. Again, the Broncos were really struggling. They had a chance, and they still do have a chance to make a wild card berth, but they needed to beat the Chiefs. The Chiefs ended up winning. It looks like Patrick Mahomes has the ship righted.
Yeah, and I mean, the difference from this year to last year is if Mahomes didn't carry his team, they were going to lose. Mm-hmm. Mahomes had a terrible game. It was not that great. Not Mahomes' elite status at all. But they made some defensive plays. They had 2 picks. They got Clyde Edwards-Helaire back, and he had a decent game. And so the Chiefs are back. The question is, how far are they going to go? If Mahomes gets to elite status, we're looking at the Chiefs back in the Super Bowl again. And they're not annoying like the Patriots yet. But this could be a repeat thing that we see for years to come with this team, all pretty much under contract.
Yep.
And we could be seeing the Chiefs this year, next year, and the following year. They have the talent. They are good.
And they have a great coaching staff, too.
Yeah.
Ravens versus Steelers. This is a game, I'm telling you, again, I'm a huge Steeler fan. I bet against my Steelers last week, which I shouldn't have. But I really didn't think that they had any chance. Now, one thing I will do, and every once in a while I will give a Harbaugh a hats off. I'm giving the Harbaugh a hats off because he had a chance to kick the extra point and go into overtime, but instead he rolled the dice on the road and decided to go for 2. And they didn't work out for him. But, I'll tell him one thing, that takes a lot of guts, and especially with a bitter rivalry like this. So I'll take it as a victory, but I just have to say that begrudgingly, Harbaugh, nice effort.
Yeah, I mean, Harbaugh made a strategic decision. What a lot of people don't know is all of his corners were basically hurt.
Oh, they were.
He thought if he went to overtime, he would get destroyed because he didn't have the defensive players to play an overtime. So it was basically an all-or-nothing situation. He knew he had too many injuries to even compete if this game went any longer, so he had to end it there, and he fell up short. And, it's unfortunate because Lamar Jackson, he had a great start of the year, but he's starting to look sketchy. He's not that reliable as he was at the beginning of the year, and the Steelers really put him in this place. So hats off to the Steelers for really showing up on defense for this game.
Yep. Next game was the Cincinnati versus the Chargers. Again, Cincinnati was red hot, and the Chargers came in and just absolutely crushed them. 41-22, I believe. Mm-hmm. What are your feelings again of which team for San Diego is going to show up? Do we know?
So this is a hard one for me. I feel like the Chargers are the Bo Nix of my NFL. Exactly. It doesn't matter if I pick them or not.
Exactly.
They're inconsistent. They show up at times and they look great. They look like they can make a run in the playoffs, and then they'll show up the following week and they'll get crushed. And there's no rhyme or reason. It's not due to injury. It's not due to anything. It's just being consistent on showing up with the intensity. They actually got lucky. They started out hot. Bengals were roaring back. If Joe Mixon doesn't fumble when he does, the Bengals had all the momentum, but that fumble really deflated them, and it turned out to be a Chargers blowout.
Well, we're going to take a tiny break here. We're sitting outside, and I need to make a bathroom break. So we're going to just take a quick break and come right back and finish up with the last 2 teams and then talk a little bit about our featured teams this week. So hold on one moment. Folks, get yourself, maybe get on the internet and look, find out where Brothers Bar and Grill is, and come on down. We've got a great day ahead of us for football, and we'll be right back.